Hello, parents. This is Donna Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child Podcast. Now, I want you to listen to these statistics. It is estimated that 54% of American children have been diagnosed with chronic illness in 2018, and that figure was only 15% a couple of years before that, and only 2% in the 1960s. Isn't it just shocking looking at that increase? 1 in 2 have anxiety, asthma, type 1, type 2 diabetes, epilepsy, cystic fibrosis, heart problems. 1 in 10 have ADHD, 1 in 5 have allergies, 1 in 6 have developmental delays, and 1 in 36 have autism. And if you're ever wondering why this is happening, you are not alone. And in today's episode, we'll dive deep into how our current environment and lifestyle choices are influencing the health of our children, but most importantly, what you listeners can do about it. I'm going to throw back to a number of years ago when I first heard those statistics from an organization called Epidemic Answers. I was floored and I knew that I had to learn more. That is why one of the many training and certifications I received had to be from this organization. And today we are honored to have with us Beth Lambert, the founder and executive director of Epidemic Answers, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to reestablishing vibrant health in our children and is at the forefront of understanding and tackling the modern health crisis affecting our children. She is an author, she's a mum, she's an educator, a former healthcare consultant, and has monitored and documented the escalating rates of children chronic conditions for over a decade. She is also the creator and executive producer of the Documenting Hope Project, which is a multi-year prospective research study and media project that examines the cumulative impact of environmental stresses on health and their mitigation through personalized and system-based treatment approaches. So stay tuned, listeners, as we navigate this complex yet crucial topic, offering you hope and encouragement along the way. Your journey towards understanding and combating the modern health crisis in children begins right here, right now. But I will say, make sure you get your pens and papers because we're going to share a unique opportunity about how you, as parents, can learn from experts, including myself, live in person so you can take control and help your child thrive. Let's welcome Beth Lambert to the podcast. Hi, Beth. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to have this chance to chat.
I am very, very excited because, this, I think your organization was one of my main motivators to really get into this industry. And I just absolutely, love what you guys are doing and what you stand for, because totally aligned with everything that I share with my audience. But we've got a lot to talk about today. So let's dive in. Beth, can we just begin by you giving us an overview of what the modern health crisis in children looks like, and how it differs from previous generations?
Yeah, it's interesting because I use the word epidemic. I mean, that's the organization's name, Epidemic Answers. And it doesn't necessarily resonate with people because a lot of times people think, epidemic in terms of infectious diseases, or they might know the obesity epidemic or the autism epidemic as if these things are singular. But I really liken this to a singular epidemic, one epidemic that we have with our kids, where all of our kids, with very few exceptions, means the vast majority of kids that are living in the modern industrial world that are exhibiting symptoms that didn't used to be there, 75 years ago or 100 years ago. They were, as you mentioned, with the statistics going from less than, 2% in the 1960s all the way up to more than half of kids. Something's changed in the environment. So we are looking at the sickest generation of children on record. It feels very distressing and overwhelming until you start understanding why we are seeing so many sick kids, because once you understand why, then you can unwind it. And for each individual child, you can begin to peel back the layers of the different health stressors that are causing that epidemic. So we're really seeing this unprecedented change in children's health because of the way we're living. I mean, it's just that simple, right? And you can go back to the way your ancestors lived. 100 years ago, 500 years ago. Just look back the way humans live, and we are living such a different way now in terms of the food we're eating. It's processed, and the healthcare we're doing, it's all chemical healthcare with pharmaceuticals, and we live indoors under artificial lights. We're not outside anymore. We don't move as much. We're on digital screens. We have electromagnetic radiation. I could go on and on and on, but it's really about the way that humans are living in the modern world and how it's total mismatch for their biology. And our kids are, of course, the youngest and the most vulnerable. So they're the ones that are going to show that impact the greatest. And so that's what we're seeing right now. It's a modern living epidemic that's impacting our kids.
100% right there. And look, I just want to take a sidestep for a second. I 100% agree with everything that you said. And, a lot of the episodes on this podcast is talking about all of that. But one thing that I've heard more and more, especially when it relates to ADHD, and I'd love your input on it, is that I hear people go, "Oh, well, it's just because we know how to diagnose better." So what would you say, if someone said that to you?
Well, so you can use that argument for a little bit, while the numbers are increasing, and be like, "Oh, well, we're just better at diagnosing." That's true. We are better at diagnosing. We have more criteria that are more detailed. We have more healthcare professionals who know how to identify autism and ADHD and these conditions that are more subjective rather than things that you do on a blood test. But when you start looking at all the different types of things that are increasing, including life-threatening food allergies, you don't miss life-threatening food allergies, type 1 diabetes. You don't miss that. Why? Because these kids die. Right. And this is not a diagnosis that we're just better at diagnosing. And the same is true with autism, too. You don't miss that many kids who are severely or even moderately impacted with autism. You might have been able to miss diagnosing kids who have mild autism, but 40% of kids that have an autism diagnosis are considered moderate to severe. That's the kind of thing where kids cannot speak, cannot live independently, maybe aren't even stooling or using the toilet into their teen years. So that's not something you miss. So I think that is, and there's been plenty of epidemiological data and research done to show that it's not just about better diagnosing. I think we have to admit, yes, we're diagnosing more, but you don't have, 1 in 36 adults walking around with autism right now, right? You just don't have that. So 100%. It's logic, and there's plenty of research now saying that that's just a nonsense explanation. We're having a frank epidemic of autism and all these other conditions.
Love your answer. Totally going to steal that and use it when someone asks me that question. Now, I know you talk a lot about total load. What is total load, and why is it so important to our children?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are looking for a smoking gun with the epidemics. Maybe it's we've been using too many antibiotics. We have too many vaccines. There's too many chemicals. Is it glyphosate? There's all these different suspected villains as who's responsible for this epidemic of chronic illness. But the reality is that it is never one thing. It's really the total load concept is about the cumulative and synergistic effect of all of these stressors on our kids' lives. And we also have kids who are growing up without the resources, without the resilience that kids used to have. And that happens because kids are undernourished. They don't have the nutrient-dense foods coming in because we eat too many processed foods, right? So the total load is about having too many health stressors, chemicals, EMS, pharmaceuticals, whatever it is, and not enough resilience to be able to withstand all those health stressors, right? So the total load concept, I think, accounts for everybody's individual experiences where, for instance, you might have somebody who never had antibiotics but developed a life-threatening food allergy. And then you might have somebody who had a lot of glyphosate exposure and developed a life-threatening food allergy. So all these different individual stories that people had that got them to their chronic illness, they make sense in the total load theory, because it's not about the specific stressors per se. It's that there's too many and too early in children's development. So when you see like autism or ADHD, that's a developmental thing going on, right? The learning disabilities, the speech delays, the walking, talking delays, that's because those stressors, those total load stressors, hit those kids when they were either prenatal or neonatal or in those early developmental years. And that's why we're seeing so much of it now. So like you said, 1 in 6 kids with a learning disability, like that's a function of too many stressors too early in these babies' lives.
Yeah, and you're so right there. I use my son as the example. He was induced at 38 weeks, normal, traditional. was induced because he was not growing properly. So they wanted to get him out. Came out, premature lung disease, was in the NICU, wasn't breastfed, was on a breathing machine, was pumped with stimulants to increase his lungs. And then we went on to having antibiotics. And, I do a lot of genetics in the families that I work with, and we're looking at a number of gene mutations. And when you pull them together, you can kind of get that risk rating of whether or not someone's more likely to have ADHD tendencies or not. My son doesn't hold any of those gene mutations. Okay. So what is causing his ADHD? You said it right. It is the total load that was on his body at such a young age. And I think that, so many people can learn. And look, I know it a lot seems overwhelming. You're saying, oh, the EMS, the diet, the this, the that. But I will tell families, and I say it a lot on this podcast, Rome wasn't built in a day. You do not need to make all of these changes at once. But once you know the why, you can take steps to get where you need to go. Now, Beth, what kind of research are you performing, and what are some of your findings? I'm fascinated by that science side, that research side.
Well, it's interesting you just asked about total load. So no one that I knew of had really looked at total load from a scientific perspective before. I mean, I used to work in healthcare consulting, and one of my jobs was to get into the medical literature and pull out, the newest research that was available. And so in doing that, that didn't exist in total load as a theory, didn't exist in the medical literature, certainly not for children. So, we wanted to test this theory. We wanted to know, what are children exposed to right now? How is it impacting their health, growth, and development? And what happens if you reduce that total load? So we actually developed a research program. It's called Documenting Hope. And we have 2 IRB-approved research studies that are head up by Dr. Chris D'Adamo, who's an epidemiologist. And our first study is called the CHIRP study, and it looks at all the environmental factors that a kid might be exposed to in modern life. So we ask parents to take a massive survey. It's over 900 questions long. It takes the average parent between 4 and 6 hours to complete it. They've had over 2,000 parents participate, and we have validated the total load hypothesis through this research. So essentially, we asked parents, like, really pre-conception, what their health was like, what their grandparents' health was like, all the way down through to the child's health. What kind of toothpaste is the child using? What are they eating? How often are they eating it? What is their stooling like? What are their symptoms like? We ask everything. And what we have found in the CHIRP study, doing analytics of the data, is that the more stressors a child has, the worse the health outcomes. Mm-hmm. So it's literally like a relationship where you can curve a linear, or you can see the relationship between more stressors, worse health outcomes. So that research really fed into our second study, which is, okay, we've now validated this total load hypothesis. We know that the more stressors a child has, the worse the health outcomes. What happens if we remove those stressors? What happens if we give that child bio-individual support? So that is our second study. It's called the FLIGHT study. And it's a longitudinal study where we're taking a small group of children who have one of several chronic health conditions or more, and we're bringing them through their own 18-month intervention program where we're assessing their total load in the beginning, doing everything we can to reduce that total load, and then give them bio-individual support. So the certain, the nutrients that might be lacking, or like you said, in genetics, like maybe there's a certain thing bio-individually that they need that's informed by their particular genetic makeup. So we have 2 kids enrolled in that study right now. One has autism and one has alopecia universalis, which is an autoimmune condition with no hair anywhere on his body. And those kids are doing great so far. And we're going to continue to enroll children into the program in a staggered start until we get up to 14 children. And we're also filming that too, because we want to not just, see what happens when you reduce the total load with a child scientifically. We want to document it on film so that we can share the stories of these kids with everybody, because truly that's what I feel like is the most compelling to get a parent to really feel inspired as possible, is to lean on the stories of other parents who've already done it. I'm one of those parents. You're one of those parents. There's tons of parents out there who've already done this healing work. Healing is absolutely possible. So the more we share that message that healing is possible, and with real true stories of people that have done it, the more we're going to get parents interested in understanding that it's totally doable.
Yeah, I look, honestly, I've got goosebumps on my arms, because I just, what you're doing is amazing, and it's amazing for the future. It's amazing for future generations. And, we run into this issue, and I don't want this to become a political thing, but like we run into this issue that, well, the medical industry are saying, well, there's no scientific studies that do it. The sheer fact is there's no scientific studies because there's no money in healing. There is no money in getting people better. The insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, they're not interested in that. They're interested in continuing profits. Not going to go on that tangent, but I think what you're doing is amazing, Beth. And I just take my hat off to you. I'm curious though, like what actually got you into being so passionate and interested about this?
It was really just my own experience with my own kids. My first two kids had a cluster of symptoms that sort of didn't really result in any kind of diagnosis. Yeah. They were kind of mild enough, but they were the kind of thing where like, my family doesn't have food allergies. Like there's no eczema. My family, like little things like that made the wheels in my brain go like, something's wrong here. What and when I would go to conventional medical doctors, they'd be like, oh no, just put a cream on it. Or it's probably genetic. And you get these answers that just don't resonate. They don't line up. So I really started going for more understanding and looking for answers for what's the root of this and how do I fix it? And then I ended up in the office of an integrative physician, Dr. Nancy O'Hara, actually. And she was the one who kind of led me to the root causes. But even more than that, my kids got, reverse their symptoms very quickly with diet changes, reducing their total load, all of those things. But more important than that, in that journey of, going to an integrative medicine practitioner, I met other parents like in the waiting room and online who were doing a similar kind of work. And they would tell me things like, oh, my child had autism, but doesn't have it anymore. Or my child was so severe with his ADHD and was on 6 medications, but doesn't have that anymore. Autoimmune disease, like you name it. I was meeting parents who had reversed all these things. And it was mind blowing for me because conventional medicine doesn't tell you that. They don't, you walk in there and you get your diagnosis and they're not like, this is reversible if you do diet changes and lifestyle changes and personalized medicine. That's not what you get. You get, this is genetic. We don't know why it's caused, like what causes it. We don't know why your child has it. And we don't know how to help you other than to give you some pharmaceuticals or maybe some therapies that may be helpful, maybe not. But like that's not an answer, especially for kids when kids have their whole life ahead of them. They're not supposed to have chronic disease. That's for older people who drank too much, smoked too much, had stressful lives, lived their whole life. They get chronic disease. Children don't get chronic disease. So that's really what got me on a tear is because I'm like, it's a sense of injustice that this is happening to our babies. So like you said, to our future generation, and we're seriously going to let this happen? This is insane. We can't let this be our children's future. Our children are not here to be sick and on medications their whole lives.
Beth, I think you're my soul sister. Everything that you're saying is like exactly what I feel inside. And it's not fair. It really isn't fair. And, my goal is to just make sure, and it sounds like it's exactly the same for you, is to like get that message out there far and wide to parents to know that hope is possible, that, you don't have to suffer when you've got a child that has this chronic disorder or illness. Your life does not need to be dictated in the case of the families that are listening to today's podcast by ADHD or autism. Your family's life doesn't need to be dictated by what is going on in your child's body. There is hope. You can do things about it. Now, what do you think is the most important thing a parent needs in order to be successful on this healing journey?
I think there, without a doubt, is one thing that has to be in place for all parents before they can begin this journey or before they can expect to have a successful outcome. And I know this from having documented the stories of people who've had successful outcomes for almost 15 years. It's all about the parent's mindset. If the parent feels defeated, or maybe has been told by their trusted physician, like this happens time and time again, when you're a trusted pediatrician, you love your pediatrician loves you, and your pediatrician tells you there's nothing you can do about your child's autism, and you believe it, you will not see progress if you're going to believe that, and that's your mindset. If you, however, hear and know and understand that there is improvement for your child, that your child can overcome their challenges, they can overcome their diagnosis. If you believe that in the core of your being, that is the single most important thing you need. And connect to that belief and that knowing, like every day, it's that guiding light internally from each parent who's involved in this. That's what drives it. It isn't the special doctor. It isn't the special diet. It isn't the thing that is going to cure your child. And I don't believe in the word cure, by the way, that's a whole other conversation, but that is not how it works. It is you as a parent knowing and believing that what's possible for your child is more than where they are right now. And that's the single most important thing. There's a whole lot of other important things too, but I feel like that's the ingredient that I see across the board in all the success stories.
You hit the nail on the head there. That is absolute gold, because you are so right. And you know what? I've never heard anyone actually say that before. And you know, you're exactly right that the parent needs the right mindset to start this, because it is possible. And you know, when you have that feeling, you're going to do whatever you need to do, really, at the end of the day.
It's like, it's literally even a subconscious thing where you have in the back of your mind this primitive kind of feature in your brain called the reticular activating system, that when you set your mind out for looking for something, your subconscious mind finds it. So as an example, if you're a very fearful person and you feel like there's danger all around you, you're constantly going to be identifying sources of danger and you're going to live that state of fear. Similarly, if you have this belief and knowing and understanding that your child's going to get better, your subconscious mind is constantly cluing into and picking up on the solutions. Like you'll hear something with an acuity that you wouldn't otherwise hear. So it's literally put your subconscious to work, finding the answers for your child. It's as simple as that. It's baked into our brains. It's like evolutionary. We should totally take advantage of it.
Oh, I don't even know what to say. Like, I am like, in my mind is just racing. I'm like, this is going to be such an amazing episode. I've got to share it from the world, because, you know, this is my passion. Like, you have got this same passion. And, you know, Beth, I'm loving this. Now, how can parents and caregivers, you know, become more proactive in preventing, like, because you can prevent this stuff. You know, there's ones out there that are listening that are trying to prevent, and there's other ones out there that are trying to manage these health challenges. So what can parents do to become more proactive?
I think the biggest thing to do is, because it can be very overwhelming to think about all the total load factors, you know, as you were sort of listening to EMF, the laundry detergent, the scented fragrance, the fluoride, like all the stuff and things that you have to all of a sudden become an expert on. You know, like we're not all biochemists or PhDs. Like, how are we going to know what's dangerous for our children and what's not? And I think that the simplest guiding post for that is to just do things in your day-to-day activities, your life, the things that you purchase, the food that you eat, the activities you engage in, should be as close to nature as possible and as close to your ancestral, you know, sort of heritage in terms of your, like, example would be, again, we spend so much time indoors. Social lights, like no one's really thinking about how these lights are impacting our, you know, not just our skin, but our eyes and all the enzymes and things that are created by the way that our skin and our eyes interact with light. Go outside. And you know for a fact that human beings over, you know, millennia evolved with their skin and their eyes and touching the, you know, the light outside and being exposed to the light outside. You know, that's where humans are supposed to be. So that's an example of one change you can make in your life that just closer to nature, closer to your ancestral heritage. So go outside more, touch the earth more with your bare feet, eat foods that are as close to nature as possible, garden if you can, eat it from farmers markets, try to eat food without chemicals. I mean, literally it's like, what is new to nature, and avoid that. Just ask yourself that question. So like your toothpaste, you use the toothpaste. Is it new to nature, or has it been around for millennia? You know, go with things that are way more naturally oriented as sort of your way of navigating the modern world. EMFs would be another one, you know, like reduce your exposure by using less time on the devices. Those are all the kinds of things that people can do, both to prevent and reverse and reduce the total load. Now, I'm not going to say reducing the total load is the only thing that somebody needs to do, because, you know, there's a lot of rehabilitative work, as you know, probably in your practice, that kids who have developmental challenges need to do, because again, those total load factors hit them when they were supposed to be developing speech and language and cognition and social interactions. So in some cases, if your child has a developmental disability, a delay, or some kind of neurobehavioral developmental diagnosis, you need to go back and revisit some of those developmental milestones, therapies for that can be super helpful. But none of that is going to work as effectively if you haven't already reduced your total load and increased 100%. Your support.
100%. And that's exactly what I teach in the program. In my program is like, let's start by reducing the load on that trash can in our body. You know, we have this metaphorical trash can in our body, and if that trash can's full and it's overloading in your body and it's spilling out and you're not effectively taking that trash can out to the side of the road on a Monday morning, you are going to be in a state of dysfunction. The inflammation is going to be raging in your body. So the first thing you need to do is you need to reduce the load on that trash can. You need to take it out to the side of the road on a Monday. Well, in our case, it's a Thursday. But you know what I mean. And then that brings me to like, okay, we can start doing all these things, and then learning from people that have been there, learning from the experts that are driving this industry, and that leads me to sort of my next thing, and I'm so excited about, because we lost so much human connection through COVID, and we're also used to being on Zoom and going and learning from experts on Zoom, and yes, well, that's great, but having the community and the human connection and learning in person is so critical to this, into helping our children thrive. So I'm curious, like, we're going to dive into this in-person conference that I alluded to at the front. What is this conference? Why did you plan an in-person conference? And, what do you hope is going to happen there?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about this loss of connection that we had sort of in this COVID and post-COVID era, where that is a fundamental part of the healing journey, is to be connected to other people and to be in community. And when I went on my healing journey with my family, I had my sister who was going through the same thing. So like that, we needed each other in person with hugs and all that kind of stuff. As you make lifestyle changes, that can be hard, because essentially you're doing something that's counter culture, right? The reason our kids are sick is because our culture is making them sick. So for you to thrive in today's world, you actually have to do things that are opposite of what everyone else is doing. That's counter culture. And in order to do that and feel good and confident and feel like you're normal, you need your people, you need your tribe. And so that was one of the primary reasons that we wanted to pull together a conference, is because, and there used to be a number of conferences in the past, like huge turnouts for autism conferences and conferences on natural healing and all these kinds of things, but COVID killed all that, and then they never came back. So this was us stepping in and saying, we'll do it. We're going to do the conference now, because we know all the stuff and things, and we know all the people that can help families thrive, but we need to get all the people there so the hugs can be, shared, and so that the connections can be made, and the lifelong friends that you meet at these conferences, you have to show up to meet those lifelong friends. Yeah. So that's part of why, we created this conference. And the other thing that we really wanted to do with this conference was, remember I talked about the flight study and how we're bringing these children through an 18-month intervention program. What we did in this program is we basically crowdsourced all the best knowledge we could come up with on what does it take to heal a child? And we brought in all these experts who know a whole lot about lab tests and nutrition and different kinds of therapies and the things that you can do to reintegrate the brain and the body. We brought all those people to sort of help us design. And actually, they're collaborating and giving their knowledge to these kids in the program. But we wanted to do that in a bigger scale, so that could be available not just for the kids in our program, but for other families who want to learn too. So we brought in experts who represent all those different areas, whether it's like lab tests and or microbiome and nutrition and functional dentistry, developmental optometry, all the things that are important to kids who have autism, pandas, ADHD, any kind of neurobehavioral condition or neurodevelopmental condition. We brought all those experts in. So that's our lineup for our conference, which is in Orlando in November. It's November 10th through 12th in Orlando, Florida. And it's called Adventures in Healing. And the reason we called it Adventures in Healing is because we want this not to be about, oh man, this healing journey is a slog and just have it be doom and gloom. We wanted to switch the mindset, right? Remember I said like how mindset's so important? Mindset is important for the parent to begin on the journey and stay in the journey. But we want this to be like, all right, what new healing thing am I going to learn when I go to this conference? Like, what's around that corner that I don't know yet? This is an adventure. You have to have that sense of like, all right, it's I'm climbing a mountain and it's hard. When you get to the top, that is just the best view ever. And that's what we're going for, is this idea that, yep, you got to do some work. Yep, it's better if you do it with friends, better if you do it in community, and better if you know that there's going to be a view at the end of that, the top of that mountain, and if you take that adventure mindset, it's going to be a lot more fun.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And it's so true. There is that amazing view at the top of that mountain. And, you've gone there, I've gone there. So many of the families that I've worked with are there. And, it's interestingly, my team in my business, 80% of them have been through my program and they've seen what it's like to take that adventure to the top of the mountain. They've seen the view from the top of the mountain. And how can you not share that with other parents? And so that's why I was so excited. I was like, I had to be involved. I had to speak at this conference, and I'm so excited to be one of those presenters in the parent track of this conference. If you can just share, some of those topics. I know you mentioned a few of the people that are going to be talking, but can you share some of the topics that will be shared?
Yeah, there's two that I'm most excited about. I'm excited about all of these. So there's a parent track and a parent and a professional track. And the professional could be anybody. You could be an OT, SLP, PT, MD, DC, doesn't matter. It's one is allows you to get some continuing education units, and the other one's really more oriented towards parents. But the two topics I'm most excited about, one is Dr. Christian Bogner, who is an autism doc and an autism dad, has a new discovery in autism. And I can't say too much about it, but because he'll talk about it at the conference, but he is finding cyanide, elevated levels of cyanide in the kids in his practice who have autism, but not in their siblings or parents. So there's something really interesting going on here. And, we don't know, or he's going to probably talk about whether it's endogenous or exogenous, meaning coming from the outside the body or something like the body is creating because of a biochemical situation. But those are new findings. Another one that's really new finding is Dr. Sabine Hazen, who is she's a gastroenterologist and she's a microbiome expert. And she's going to be talking about the gut and the microbiome and how critical that is to health and healing. And she's got some new findings that I've heard her present in private fundraisers before. She's done some presentations for us, and she hasn't presented this stuff, publicly yet, that you want to hear, because it's really, really interesting new stuff. We also have a ton of topics on nutrition, a ton of speakers on nutrition. So Julie Matthews, who's a long time, professional in autism, ADHD. She's got a program called Nourishing Hope. She's going to be speaking. Vicki Kobliner, who's a dietitian, will be talking about food. We have a chef coming in who is talking about how to actually make yummy food that's healthy for your family.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, right? Like, what's the practical? Like, you can understand from the nutritionist all the things you should do, but how do you actually make that practical? And Dr. Medea Saeed, who is a integrative physician, she's a mother of 5 boys, and somehow she's working and has 5 boys and somehow manages to get her kids to eat healthy food. So that's a person you want to listen to. And then we also have a lot of talks on pans and pandas, which, of course, as you know, is just escalating the number of kids that are developing pans and pandas. And we have a couple talks on genomics and some on developmental delays and how do you overcome speech delays, language delays, how do you overcome some of the things we see with kids when they are delayed. So we have a number of talks in that category, regulating the nervous system, how to calm your child. Those are all some of the topics that we have, and that's just scratching the surface. So I could go on and on and on. We have the topics listed. If you go to conference.documentinghope.com, all the topics and all the speakers are listed there, so you can see what the lineup is. I'm so excited. I mean, literally, when I set out to do this conference, I wrote down a list of all the people that I wanted to show up. They all said yes, like every single one of them. So I was like, this is the best ever. Like, it's the best outcome I could have imagined. So
that's amazing. And I'm so excited. We're definitely going to drop that link in the show notes. But also, like, parents, if you're listening, share this episode. Share this episode. It doesn't matter if they've got ADHD or not. Like, this is about a bigger, what's the word? Completely mental blank. Gone out of my thing, but a bigger
phenomenon. It's a bigger phenomenon.
This is bigger than ADHD. This is for our children. This is for making sure that they are going to thrive in life, that they're not going to end up, with all of this sickness and all of this disease and be on multiple medications, which, a lot of us have had our children on multiple medications. Likewise with myself. My son was on 3. The doctor wanted to put him on the 4th. Not okay. So I think that I'm so excited about this conference. We will drop the links in the show notes. And Beth, as we wrap up today, do you have any parting words of like hope and encouragement for families navigating these challenges?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that our organization is doing now to try and both provide more hope and encouragement, but also the support that people need. So, like, we have been throwing out in the last few months a number of really compelling success stories, the videos. So if you follow us on social, at Documenting Hope, either on Instagram or on Facebook or Twitter, we have these stories of success stories, kids who have overcome all kinds of diagnoses, and we're going to continue to let those stories out as we produce them. But one of the other pieces is the support. So you get this story, you see this kid who overcame their challenges. How did they do that? What did they do? So then we invite everyone into a community online that we've created called Healing Together. And so that is a place for parents to come in and learn all the things that you need to learn to get your child back on the road to thriving. And we have live calls with integrative physicians, live calls with health coaches. And if you attend the conference, you get a free membership. So it's like, that is our goal this year, is to create community. So we're creating a community in the conference, but we want that conference not to be the only touch point for these parents. We want everyone to come together after the conference and hang out online, where we have a forum and a place for you to connect with other parents. So that is what I would say is, that is the best thing that people can do who want this for their children. Come join the community, whether that's in person at the conference, online, or both, because that's the way that healing happens. It's with friends, with support, with family, with community. So if you don't have an immediate, like a lot of people are like, everybody in my family thinks I'm weird because I'm gluten-free or all that, we'll be your family. Like we will take that for you.
Yeah, that's definitely, the community is super, super important. And that's why, the Facebook group that I run, I think there's like 25,000 members in it, and just knowing that you're with your people that are navigating these challenges of ADHD for our listeners, and then other challenges out there with their children. It's so, so important. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today and just sharing your passion. Like the passion, I could feel it from through this screen, and I can't wait to see it in person in November. Just reiterate where families can find out about the conference.
Yeah, it's conference.documentinghope.com. And if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you'll see those links dropped all the time, and links in our bio and stuff like that. So
awesome. Fantastic. Thank you once again for joining me today. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.